Hi, this is John from OneHourAcademy.com, welcoming you to my tutorial on JQuery events. So take a look at what we're going to be making here. We can hover over each picture and get a different color border. We can also click on each picture and load the text up over onto the side. So these are the two events that we're going to work with in JQuery, hovering and clicking. And we can write code in JQuery to respond to both of these. So if you wanted to get this exact example that I've got, what you can do is download some starting files from my website, OneHourAcademy.com. This is my location for all of my tutorials that are also on YouTube. But here you can find the download files that go along with this particular lesson. So if you go over to courses and you hover onto jQuery in 1 hour, you'll see a link there, download lesson 4 files. This is a zip file that comes down, and if you unzip it right into Windows Explorer, you'll see the actual folder. Now what I recommend you do is take this JQ events folder and just copy it and paste it right to the desktop. Inside here is all the images and the text files you need. So if I paste it here, you'll see the folder will show up right on the desktop, and you can see it just up here ready to go. So once you've downloaded and unzipped it to the desktop, let's just open up the index, which is the file we'll be working on, and just take a look at it in Notepad just so you can see what we've got here. So when you take a look at this code just in Notepad, I'll go up close here. You can see I've got a link to the external jQuery library hosted at jQuery.com, so that allows me to use jQuery on my page. I've also got my own script section, which starts with the startup function. So I make a call to startup when the document loads, and there's my function that I'll fill in later. In the body area, I don't have much yet. All I've got is a heading 1 that says new web project page. So this is where we're going to put the image source code, and most of our work will go down there. Now, you're not going to work in Notepad, so I'm going to show you here how to import this into Aptena Studio. So if you go File, Import, Existing Folder as New Project, and you go to the next step, we're going to hit Browse, go to the desktop, find the JQ events folder right there, and say OK, and just finish. And then if I open this up, you'll see the entire project, and there's that same web page now in Aptena Studio. Now if you prefer to use something like Sublime Text, it's a lot easier. So if you've got Sublime Text installed on your computer, really all you got to do is drag and drop the folder right onto the to the workspace there, and you can see the same page loaded up in Sublime. But I'm going to use Aptena for this lesson. So in Aptena, with what we've got so far, if I just push play and preview, you'll see that all we've got is that heading 1 new project web page. So at this point I want to go through a slideshow to cover step by step how we got that giraffe and elephant example to work. So as you saw when I demonstrated that live, there's a couple of things that can happen when somebody interacts with your page. The more common things that people do are click on things and mouse over things. Now whenever that happens, an event has occurred. Okay, and we can write jQuery code to respond to things like mouse clicks and mouse hovers. So there's also keyboard events too, but we're not going to cover those in this video. But if you're interested in keyboard events, there's also lots of tutorials out there that cover keyboard events in jQuery as well. So here's a really simple example. Say I had a picture and I gave it an ID of pic. If I wanted a pop-up message to appear when I click on the picture, then I would put something like this, hashtag pic, talking to my pic my pic ID, .click, and then pop-up. So what's pop-up? Well, pop-up is a separate function that I'm going to write below that's going to have the code in it that I want to run. So in this case, I'm going to say just simply alert you clicked on the picture. Now, there's a lot of books out there, a lot of tutorials that cover this in a different way. There's quite a popular way of doing this, which is called an anonymous function. So rather than directing the click to a separate function called pop-up, we just remove the name of the function altogether and put the entire function code right inside these brackets. Let me show you what that looks like. So you'll see this quite a bit, and this is a more common way of doing it. So on click, the function goes right inside the click command. So if you prefer to do it this way, you can. I prefer to give my functions separate names and take them out just to make it a little bit more readable for me. So moving forward in this example, I'm going to use named functions rather than these anonymous functions. But this is another way that you can do it. So if I was going to do this on a real web page, I would do something like this. Now don't start with this as your starting code. We're going to go through the actual example in a second. This was just me playing around before I actually got the complete lesson done. So what I did is I just added the image down here just for the giraffe at this point, and I gave it the ID of pick. So in startup, I would just go #pick.click popup, and the separate pop-up function would go right below. So it's still within the script area, but it's a separate function that jQuery goes looking for when I click on anything with the ID of pick, which in this case is the giraffe. So that's a quick example. And then if I was going to click on the giraffe, I would get the pop-up that comes over top of it like that. Now the real example we're going to do starts on the next slide. So what we're going to do in our example, if you download it from onehouracademy.com, then you should have this information. If you don't, you can go back and review that, or you can just try it with your own images and your own information as well. But what I did first is in the body section, I added 2 image source tags for my giraffe and my elephant. Now these are both found in the images folder as part of what you downloaded, so you have to direct HTML to where they're located so you can find them. And for this actual example, I gave them each a separate ID. The giraffe is called gpic, and the elephant is supposed to be called epic, but I know that's also the word epic, but I can refer to it as epic from this point on because that's what it's really meant to be. I've also added this div. Okay, so if you don't know what a div is, it's basically just a named spot on your web page. So it's just a zone on your web page that you have to give a name to so that later we can point to it and say, okay, I want to load something into that zone. So I think of a div as like a zone or like a slice of my page. So right now my zone contains 1 spacebar, so it's a very small zone. But I have to give this div a name, so I'm going to call it info, so later I can talk to it and tell it to load the information when I click on either the giraffe or the elephant. So we're just going to add that in as well. So after you've got, and that's all for the body, you're basically done the body part of the web page already. But now we've got to work with both the style and the jQuery code in the script section. So let's go to the style next. So in the style section, we're going to, this looks a little bit messy, but I wanted to sort of throw it all on one slide so you can see it. So below the script is where we're going to add this section called style. So a style basically tells the elements in your body how they should look when they are displayed on your page. So after the script area, we're going to give each image a border and a margin. So you can see down here, I've got the IMG tag, and I'm saying I want the border for all images to be a 2-pixel solid black border, 20 pixels margin. That'll give a bit of space between each picture, so there's a bit of a gap there. What float left does, and you can see that here, it says images and the info area will float to the left, so they will be all beside each other. Okay, I want all 3 things lined up on the same line, and by default they're going to kind of fight for their own space and kind of end up on top of each other sometimes. So float left is a way to guarantee that they're going to stack in order from the left beside each other if there's enough room, and I made sure that there was because my width of my info is 300 pixels and the other images are small enough that we can fit a 300 pixel info area beside them. So if you've added this style to your web page and you save it, here's what you should have at this point. Now at this point the hovering and the clicking don't work, but you should see the style at least kick in, and you'll see both pictures with the black border. You see a bit of a margin between each of these. Now the info is there as well, but you can't see it right now because there's really nothing in it except a spacebar. But you'll have to trust me that info is sitting over here beside the elephant waiting for its information to be loaded later on. So that's the second pillar. Now we're going to go to the third and final thing, which is the actual jQuery. Okay, so in the startup, we're going to start by saying when the gpic and epic are clicked on, they're each going to run a function. So we're going to start by saying gpic, when I click on you, I want you to run show g. Epic, when you get clicked on, you're going to run show e. So after startup, we're going to go on to define both of these. Now here's the code I'm going to show you that is used to actually load the information up. Okay, so on the next slide here, you can see where that comes in. So right after these clicks, this is a brace to end my startup function, and that's all startup does, is it just directs things to other functions when they get clicked on. So show g and show e basically do the same thing. They're both talking to the info div, and they're saying, info, I want you to load this file. Okay, now I've got info in front of it because both of these files are located in a separate folder called info, not to be confused with the div tag, which is called info as well. Now this load is a jQuery function. It's actually an AJAX shortcut. AJAX is another technology you can use to load live data onto a web page. It's fairly complex and way beyond the scope of this tutorial, but just to let you know that jQuery makes it much easier with this load function. But what we're basically doing is loading up the text file into the info area. Now on the next slide, I just want to remind you what exactly we have with what got downloaded from 1 Hour Academy. So here again is the info folder with the 2 text files. Take a look at the elephant text file. It basically has valid HTML code in it as well, and that will get honored when it gets loaded into the div. So we're going to have a heading 2 of elephant and a nicely formatted paragraph about elephants. Giraffe has a similar type of thing as well. Here again is the code we already wrote for the show G and the show E function. Just wanted to make sure that nobody got confused between hashtag info, which is the name of my div, and this info, which is the name of my folder. On hindsight, I probably should have given them different names, but hopefully that's pretty clear to you that there's a difference there. So we're pretty much done with that part. However, we're not done with the hovering, so let's move on to that. So to hover, we got to basically attach another style to our pictures when they get hovered on. And what we do is we create this thing called a class. So in your style section, I need you to go back and add one more thing, which is this dot red box. So oftentimes web designers will create these things called classes, which are styles that will later get applied to different elements when you attach a class to them. So this red box style simply does one thing. It just redefines the border to be 2 pixels solid red instead of black. So now we're going to write jQuery code that basically attaches this class to those images when they get hovered on. So we're going to do that in the next slide. So add this .redbox class to your style section, and then we can move on to the final piece, which is the hover. So the nice thing about hover is even though jQuery requires 2 functions, because when you hover, you mouse in and you mouse back out. Each time you go in and then back out, that triggers another hover event. So jQuery is expecting 2 separate functions, one for when you come in and one for you go back out. But luckily for us, we're going to write this function called makeRed, which is going to get run either time when you hover over. So what you're going to write is this. You're going to add this to your startup. Image. Notice I'm not saying epic or gpic. I could have done that, but because they're both images and they both behave the same way when you hover over them, we can just go img, and that refers to any image on my page. And we're going to ask when .hover happens to run makeRed when you hover in, and also to run makeRed when you hover back out. So what is this makeRed? Well, this is another function that's going to use a toggle class, which I'll show you on the next slide. So in effect, when we hover in, we're going to make it red. When we hover back out, it's going to remove the class and unmake it red, for lack of a better way of describing that. So here's what that looks like. So below the show G and show E, you're going to add this makeRed function. And this keyword here, which is literally the word this, refers to any item that's running this function at that time. So we'll get back to this in a second. I'll explain that a bit better, but whatever it is that we're talking to, we're going to get it to toggle the class redbox. So toggle is like off and on. So toggle class on and then toggle class back off. So if it already has the red box attached to it, it's going to remove it. If it doesn't have it, it's going to add it. So it's a very handy jQuery on-off type of function that either adds or removes redbox. Let me just explain this one more time. If I go back to the previous slide, notice that the hover happens to any image. So this is kind of a tricky thing, because any image could be the giraffe, it could be the elephant. We don't know which one it is. But whichever one it is that's causing the hover event to happen, we want this image, whichever one it is, to run the makeRed function. So literally the word this is used in place to refer to the thing that's causing this hover to happen at that given time. So that's why we use the word this. It's a fairly common technique used in jQuery, referring to the object that's causing this function to happen in the first place. So it's a nice way to just say whatever thing is being hovered on, that's the thing that I want to run this toggle class on right now. Okay, so there you have it. Here again is the entire thing. This is the script section here, showing you the 3 directives in startup to go to show G, show E. When I click on these images and either image hovers to makeRed, there's the 3 functions that I refer to in startup, and it'll find them when the events occur. Then we have the style section, which deals with the info div as well as the 2 images, and this red box class, which gets toggled when we hover over any of the images. And then we can't, of course, forget the body, which we started with, which still just has the 3 images, or sorry, the 2 images and the div tag. Okay, and put this all together, and you're going to have the working demo that I showed you at the start of the video. So here's all that code one more time in Aptena Studio. You can see at the top I've got my startup function which gives directives to the elephant and the giraffe pictures in the image to go to 3 other functions. Below that are the 3 other functions, show G, show E, and make red. In between there is the style section with information about the 3 things that we did, and then the body section at the bottom. So if I push play one more time from Aptana Studio, there it is again. You can see the hover action with the red border kicking in, as well as the click with the elephant and giraffe information coming up over there on info. So that takes care of the entire lesson. Hope you enjoyed that. This, once again, is John from onehouracademy.com. And if you enjoyed this video and other ones like this, please subscribe to my channel, 1 Hour Academy on YouTube. In our next video, we're going to be looking at animations in jQuery. Thanks for watching.